Elizabeth Ruiz, and I'm retired after 40 years in radio news, and now I'm working part-time at KLRN. I'm the evening anchor. I do 1-minute updates 2 or 3 days a week. Wow, that it was an incredible time at San Antonio College. I am so grateful to San Antonio College for everything I learned there, because that's where I learned journalism. That's where I learned radio, TV, a little bit of film, and it was all there. That's where I went from San Antonio College to my job, because before that I was a high school choir director and assistant band director. That's what I had gotten my degree in, bachelor's degree. And then during the summer I tried something different every year. And there was this one summer when one of my friends said, I am in RTF classes at SAC and I'm having the best time. And I thought, oh, that sounds like fun. So I thought I tried, but I got hooked. And then I realized that I needed more. I needed to learn journalism. So I signed up for the journalism department, and boy, did I have an awakening there. I didn't even know how to type, and back then we had the manual typewriters. It's so hard to type on those manual typewriters, but I didn't even know how to type. And my journalism teacher caught me writing my stories, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm writing my stories and then I'll type it. And he said, oh no. He said, don't tell me you don't know how to type. So he went and signed me up for a class, and so I was learning to type while I was taking journalism. But it was just incredible. And then in the radio, TV, and film department, the best teachers there too. Jean Longwith, the legend, she has developed so many radio personalities, and she was great. She got me my first part-time job, and it was at KKYX, a country radio station. And I had majored in music, so I was a music snob, and she said, KKYX has an opening, and it was from 5 to 8:30 in the morning, something like that. Well, nobody else wanted it, but I was serious. I was serious about my career. However, I did tell her, KKYX? Don't they play country western music? And I made that face, and I always had that cigarette in her mouth. And that's when smoking was allowed in the station, in the radio station, and everywhere in the classroom. So, young lady, you are not going over there to listen to music. You're going to learn journalism. So that's why I'm sending you there, because they have a great news department. And I said, okay then. I said, if you think it's good for me, I'll do it. So parking was always a big problem at SAC. I don't know if it still is, but it was back then. And what I would do is I'd work from 5 to 8:30 in the morning, go over to SAC, find my parking place, set an alarm clock to wake me up whenever my next class was. 10:30, 10:50. I would sleep in my car. Wintertime, I had my blanket. So it's kind of like a homeless person. But you do what you gotta do, you know, when you're really serious about what you're doing. And I didn't have any time to waste. When this is your second career, you want to go there, you want to learn, you want to get a job. I had to make money. So that was great. I had a wonderful radio, TV, and film instructor, Jeff Hinger, or oh gosh, I can't remember his last name. Oh, forgive me, Jeff. He was wonderful, and well, so was everybody else. But I really liked that you got a hands-on experience. You got hands-on experience at San Antonio College, which really, really helped. By the time I went to radio, I was familiar with the equipment. But what I've got to keep saying is in journalism, you know, you really have to know how to read, how to report. You've got to know the ethics, and that is so important. So to me, they go hand in hand, because I kind of think you can teach somebody how to use equipment, but teaching them how to write and what questions to ask and about ethics, that's a little bit that's a little bit more, you know. So I had fantastic teachers in both the journalism department and radio, TV, and film. In journalism, Dub Doherty was my main instructor, and he used to call me a retread because I was coming back after having a career in teaching. I was coming back to learn something totally different, but he was so fantastic. Chet Hunt, Jerry Townsend, Marianne Odom, all of those in the journalism department in RTF. Like I said, I mentioned Jeff, I mentioned Ms. Longwith. How fortunate am I to have learned from Jean Longwith, and now there is a building named after her. I am so glad that SAC did that for her memory, because she deserves every accolade that she can get. She deserves every accolade that she gets. May she rest in peace. Hands-on experience that was very valuable. And in the journalism department, I thought that I would pretend to write stories and turn them in as an assignment for a grade, a letter grade. And no, I had to write stories for the Ranger. So I said, what? I thought, you know, my very first one was on a group selling raspas or something to raise money. And he said, no, you're writing this for the Ranger, so it better be right. And Mr. Doherty was very, very strict about that. I went on to become editor of the Ranger, and then I stayed on an extra semester to be managing editor, which is a lower position, but I felt like I had missed something, and so I stayed on to learn more. As a matter of fact, KTSA radio came and asked if I would, well, they offered me a job. A full-time job. You know, I was working part-time at KKYX, and they offered me a full-time job. And I said, no, because I've still got another semester at SAC. And they couldn't believe it. And neither could my friends. They said, are you kidding me? KTSA, they were a big, big station back then. And they said, you turned them down? Then they came back and said, okay, you can work part-time so that you can still finish this semester at SAC, because I wanted to be managing editor of the Ranger. And they said, Henry Cisneros is running for mayor, and you would get to cover that campaign. Well, they had national media following him everywhere, because he became the first Latino mayor of a major U.S. city. So there was a lot of national press, and when they told me that, I went, whoa! That is an opportunity. I would get to cover the campaign and still go to SAC, so I did it. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. As the editor, it was my job to interview the president of the college, and I would go back and write my story. And there were a couple of times when Dub Doherty said, did you ask him such and such? And I said, oh no, I forgot. Or, oh, I should have. So he said, make another appointment. And it was embarrassing, because the president of the college, and you have to call him back and say, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you something. But he was so nice, because we were students, but still, it was embarrassing. So it's like, okay, then the next time I said, oh, I better make sure I ask everything, because I don't want to come back and have to make another appointment with the president of the college. So yeah, that stayed with me. Gosh, so many things. I mean, accuracy, which if we would get a name wrong, it would be a letter grade taken off. So it was pretty strict. It was pretty strict. And then in the RTF department, we also did TV. My friends and I, we had a group similar to yours, and we did a commercial, a television commercial. So that gave me experience that I never thought I would use because TV was the furthest thing from my mind. And before that, radio was the furthest thing from my mind. I just kind of fell into it. But yeah, I learned a lot there in all facets of media, except what we have today, which is we didn't even have cell phones back then. We had to carry quarters around, and when we were at a news conference, it's like the person with the most quarters and the fastest one to find a phone booth. Do you all even know what a pay phone is? Oh my gosh. Then the reporters were in line fighting to be first to feed the story. And if you didn't have any quarters, you were out of luck. But geez, no cell phones. It's hard to imagine. Oh, God, favorite classes. Well, I guess I've already gone on about the journalism and the editing and the managing editor. We would go to the printer and we'd be there till around midnight. And the printer was so patient with us, but I'll never forget that. And then with radio, yeah, of course, working for the radio station there, that was great. But then I also had a part-time job at a commercial radio station. So I had the best of all worlds there at SAC. I did have my own, I guess we all had to. And so I would think, is anybody listening out there? People in the cafeteria or whatever. Yeah, that was pretty exciting there at SAC when I did have my own radio show. I just couldn't believe that there were people listening. But then I went to work at KKYX, while I was going to SAC. So then I was really talking to more people. My job, my weekday job was just dubbing cards, dubbing the ABC feeds, the ABC news stories on 8-tracks. Have you all seen those at a museum somewhere? So it was my job to get them off the reel to reel, put them on 8-tracks so that the news anchor could use them in his newscast, Ken Carter. And so that was my main job there. But then on the weekends, I used to anchor on Sunday afternoons. And I also had to take the transmitter readings. KKYX at that time was in the boonies. You go there now and my goodness, it's so crowded, so many stores, so many shopping centers and everything in the area. But back then, I had to drive out to the transmitter and take the readings to make sure that the levels were okay. And I was always afraid of getting bitten by a snake or something, but that was my job. It was a part-time job, and yeah, that was an experience. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not their fault, but we didn't even have, like I said, cell phones, the web, internet, any of that. So, but that didn't exist back then. So, and the reporting experience that I got in the journalism department, when you're the editor, you have to cover the school board meetings, the Alamo, now it's Alamo College's school board, but back then I had to cover the school board meetings, and that really prepared me for the city council meetings and the commissioner's court meetings. If I had not had that experience, I don't know what I would have done. But because I had the experience of covering the school district board meetings while I was a student at San Antonio College, I was able to just slide into covering the city council meetings. And it was on a much bigger scope. with a much bigger budget, but I do remember being so nervous when I was covering my first city council meeting. The mayor, all of the city council members there, and big issues they were dealing with, and I thought, how am I going to cover this? But once the meeting started, I said, oh, this is like the school board meetings I covered at SAC. So I had to just think about that. I said, it's just on a much bigger scale. So that experience to me was so valuable. When I retired from radio, I was doing Facebook Live. I had to go and report on the stories, record, come back and edit the stories, put together the packages and the sound bites, and then write the story for the website too. So you have to be able to do it all now. And now I guess I'm called a multimedia reporter, because you not only do that, you not only do the, well, now they even call it storytelling. They don't call it reporter anymore, they call it storytelling. I don't know why, I mean, but anyway. So yes, now you have to be able to do it all. You have to be able to write. You have to be able to take a, oh my gosh, especially in radio, you take a city council meeting that'll last 4 hours. If you're lucky, it's that short. 3 hours or 4 hours, and then you have to go and put that into a 30-second package, 30 seconds or 45 seconds. In TV, you get a little longer, but even so, it's not that. So you have to pick out what you think is the most important issue and do that. But yeah, and then I did appreciate the fact that I got to write a web story, because I could flesh it out. In 30 seconds, how much can you tell about it? You know, and even when you do, say, 2 sound bites, you write around the sound bite, that's still, it can't be more than 30 seconds. So 30 seconds, 45 seconds, that's all you got on the air. But our listeners who want more on the story can go to the website. So that's why you have to be able to do it all. And if you're a television reporter, everybody's cutting back. Everybody's doing more with less. So in television, a lot of reporters have to be their own camera person. So yeah, I didn't have to do that. I haven't had to do that, but yeah, that's how it is in the real world. I started my radio career while I was at SAC. I was at San Antonio College from 1979 to 1981. So that's in 81 is when Henry Cisneros ran for mayor, and that's when KTSA hired me to follow the campaign. So 1981, but then in 1980, I was already working at KKYX part-time. That was an internship, but I was getting paid. Not much. Definitely, definitely. Gene Longwith saw something in me and recommended me to KKYX. And that's, sure. I mean, I don't know where I would have been if she had not recommended me to KKYX. It would have taken me a little bit longer to get my foot in the door. Immediacy, because working on the San Antonio College on the Ranger, working on the Ranger allowed me more time to write my stories, but in radio, I realized the immediacy, and I had to rush back and feed my stories, get them on the air, and then later on anchoring, I had to write, and just everything is a constant deadline of some sort, you know, because some news anchor would want the story that you went out and reported on, and then I would be at the anchor desk and want the same from the reporter. Where's that story? Where's that story? But then I would also have to write other stories. So Yeah, constant. You're under a constant deadline. And I'm sure it's the same in television. You knew that I did that? Yes. That was a trip because on KTFM in the morning, I just had a 90-second newscast. And so I would do that and then play around with Sonny Melendres and the crew. And we had a party every morning. That was wonderful. And when we got off the air, he would go home and or go on with the rest of his day. And I would have to go and put on the other hat, KTSA, and go and cover City Hall stories, county commissioners, the police beat, whatever was going on. So yeah, but it was fun. Again, I thought it's the best of both worlds because that way I got to find out what was going on in our city, having to cover news conferences, having to cover issues, and then I got to play around on KTFM. So the best of both worlds, really. And then there was a time where I was part of the show called, The Wear Pair with Liz, and that was in the morning. I was having to do that show, then run across the hall and do newscasts on KTFM. So when they would be on their break, I'd be across the hall doing news on KTFM. Oh, well, that was interesting. My first national convention. Boy, you know a lot about me. I covered the Democratic National Convention, and it was in California. It was in San Francisco. And so we were, of course, on a way different time. And our morning guy on KTSA wanted the news stories by 5 a.m., which meant I had to feed him by 3 a.m. So I think when I was walking across the lobby, coming in from some late night conventions or parties where you can get the real stories, I don't know what kind of job they thought I had walking across the lobby all dressed up at that hour. And then there was one time I ran out of batteries and I had to find a convenience store someplace open at that time. I had to take a taxi to go do that. But yeah, so that was kind of crazy. I didn't get much sleep during the convention because of the difference in times and the times that I had to feed my stories. I loved it because it was such a variety. And I got to pick a lot of the guests that I had. So there was one time we had bagpipers all in this little studio. But I love the theater of imagination, which I don't think people deal with that much anymore. But I think back then that's what radio was. It was theater of the imagination. So you try to paint a picture for the people who are listening to you. They've got all these visions that pop up, you know, and or they're picturing in their minds what they think you're doing. So it was just wonderful. I would always try to have musicians, and I guess because I had majored in music and that was my career before, you know, I was more attuned to that, but it worked well with radio. So, but having bagpipers and then various music groups all in the studio. People, when I would first propose the idea, they say, "Are you kidding? You're going to have everybody there?" You know, and then bagpipes. You know how loud they are, and then people are going. But it was fun. Oh, I enjoyed that so much. I had a cooking show. I don't cook. I never have. So, but I would try to act real interested, you know, when they were talking about what they were doing. And then this one woman was talking about, oh yeah, and then the lip of the pan. And I thought, oh, you have a pan that has lips? And she looked at me like I was crazy. The lip of the pan. Oh, okay. But it was crazy, but it was something different. I love to learn new things, and I'm open to new ideas. So it was a ton of fun for me. Oh gosh. Oh well, I guess being a woman. When I first started, there weren't many women in radio or TV, and or Latinos or Latinas, you know, on English speaking radio stations or on the English television stations. So that was a hurdle, but I never thought about it that way. I just kept thinking, you be the best you can be, no matter what color you are, what gender you are. Don't give them any excuse not to hire you. Don't give them any excuse to fire you. You do 110% and more, and they can't help but want to keep you because you're productive, because you're doing something. So I never really let that get in my way. I didn't want to dwell on, oh, well, I don't get to do this because I'm Hispanic, or because you just keep trying harder and harder and harder. You may think it's not fair, but at least that's how I got it done. Just be the best you can be. Be the best you can be. Like I said, give 110% and don't give people an excuse to want to fire you or give them an excuse not to want to hire you. Just be so good that you're going to blow their minds away. I mean, if you're one of these people who calls in sick, you know, every other day, or you're not going to last at any job. I mean, this is good advice for any job. I mean, I don't care if you're the garbage collector. You be the best at what you're doing. And don't think, oh, this is such a menial job. They hired me to, you know, like me, the first job, dubbing the feeds, putting them on a cart for the anchor. You know, somebody else would have said, oh, I'm not going to do that. And I think sometimes young people are so picky about these jobs instead of thinking, oh, this is helping me get my foot in the door. Now, if you do it and you're still doing that same menial job for, you know, years, and that's not good either if you're not moving up. I'm just glad y'all are here, and I'm glad that your class is doing something like this. And I do, for the record, want to make it clear that I was not there when San Antonio College started 100 years ago. Contrary to popular rumor,